What we want is that let the fortune that is being amazed by the rich, let it be there, but we can't have the division. We can't have the gap to keep on being increased at a longer version. Can we inch closer in terms of providing them that basic food, shelter and clothing? And especially when it comes to food, education should be made as a primary access to every child in this world. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Chapter 3, Unit 3, second semester, B.B.A, Sustainable Development, where we are going to speak about the Sustainable Development Goals, Targets and Indicators. This is a very interesting session where we are going to understand about what are the goals that are being set by the UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, in tandem with other countries in order to attain the sustainable goals in the coming years. By the year 2030, which is going to be a year of landmark judgment altogether. Why? Because we are worried about, by this year, we have set the benchmark to eradicate the extreme poverty for all the people everywhere in this globe. And currently, we are measuring people who are living less than $1.25 a day. So what are we really worried about? What is that we, it's getting onto our mind, it's getting onto our system altogether, is that we want to eradicate this poverty. We want people to understand that they can also live freely. They can also live according to their will and wish. So we want to see a system that can probably develop and give everybody that financial freedom, make them sustainable enough in this great planet. So down the road, what we are planning is that we want to see that this is going to go up and we are going to create a system through which people are going to completely come out of poverty. The second thing is that we want to reduce at least half of the proportion of men, women and children of all ages living in poverty and its dimension. Now, the poverty has got a lot of segmentation. It talks about men, it talks about women, it talks about children, because everybody are suffering from this unique problem. Though we can say that poverty is just an outcome of non-employment or when you don't have income at all. But then the real factor, when we start digging deep into poverty, we understand that the levels of poverty are different. So what we want to see is that whether it be men, women or children, everybody should come out of poverty by 2030. So at least we have kept a target of 50% to be eradicated in terms of poverty reduction. Followed by, the goals also talk about implement nationally appropriate social protection system, which means we are going to involve government also and the public, and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030 achieve substantial coverage for the poor and the vulnerable. Now, there are nations in this world which we know who are rich in terms of their mineral wealth, in terms of their assets, in terms of the growth quality altogether. But then there are nations who are not able to support and bring their entire citizens together. So that's where what we want to do is that we want to implement a program that is socially active, providing a sustainable income to all the people so that we can slowly eradicate poverty, bring those poor people back into action. We want to see that the vulnerability that is being raised because of the various factors, not alone poverty. It is all about the life security. It's about the food security that we are talking about. We're also talking about the environmental consequences that are being going through in this particular cities. So we want to reduce it. Now, can we go against nature and do it? The answer is definitely not. But what we want to do is that we want to build in a secured system through which we can make this goal achievable. Now, the next thing is that by 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to the economic resources as well as access to the basic services, ownership, control over land and the other forms of property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology and financial services, including that of microfinance. So we are trying to go further, trying to understand how a particular citizen can be given an access to the basic services, ownership of the land factor, property and other things, so that everybody starts feeling secured about the factor that yes, there is something for me on this earth to live in. Now, one side, when we talk about this property index, real estate index and the asset index all together, there are people and there are countries where you will see that they have amassed huge amount of wealth. They have made it to an extent that today people, they have gone forward with that amount of properties and growth that it has really shot across in terms of the development aspects. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, I am sure about this, not everybody is benefited with those kind of indexes. Not everybody is being able to come up in the Fortune 500 list. What we want is that let the fortune that is being amazed by the rich, let it be there, but we can't have the division. We can't have the gap to keep on being increased at a longer version. So we want the gap to be reduced. We want everybody to get the access to the basic facilities. We want everybody to understand that yes, there is something for you. And we want them to have that inheritance. We want them to give the financial security. We want them to give them all sort of benefits so that they can also propel in life. So at the end of the day, what we are interested really on talking upon is that we want to see that every citizen of this country, of this world, will be able to get some basic facilities by which the sustainability talk becomes true. Followed by the 2030 end all forms of malnutrition, and by 2025 internationally we have agreed on certain targets where we want to try to bring out those children out of the malnutrition factors, especially under 5 years of age, and address the nutrition needs in terms of the adolescent age, the pregnant and the women all together. Now, why we want to see this is that over a period of time, it is quite alarming for all of us to understand, to observe and to go forward in terms of talk is that the malnutrition problem. Certain parts of the country, certain parts of the world, if I have to talk about, they are not having the basic amenity, basic facility of getting a nutritious food altogether. Now, is it their mistake or is it the mistake of the government becomes a debatable factor altogether. But what we are interested here is that we don't want children under the age of 5 years to become a target of malnutrition. We want them to understand very clearly that here we want to reduce that malnutrition factors. We want women, we want children to have the basic food so that their lifestyle can change. They can have a better living condition. Now, is it possible that for the government of every country to provide food for their hundreds and thousands of citizens? Probably not. But what we want to understand here is that can we inch closer in terms of providing them that basic food, shelter and clothing? And especially when it comes to food, can we be able to bring in some sort of comfort in terms of reducing that malnutrition? Followed by the sustainable food production and implementation of the resilient agricultural practices that increase productivity and production. Of course, not to forget all those things which have been maintaining on the ecosystem altogether, and that strengthen the capacity, adaptation of climate changes, extreme weather conditions that we are talking about, the drought, the flood and disasters and other factor are definitely going to have a very, very significant impact. I'm not going to just go ahead and say that yes, these are something which is just going to happen altogether, but I'm going to definitely say that we have to reduce these disasters, we have to reduce all these factors so that At some point of time, we will be able to go back and tell our generation very clearly that yes, we have created a planet that is sustainable for you. Because if you're going to lose out on soil, if you're going to lose out on the weather conditions, if you're going to lose out on the basic environmental, the ecosystem is going to be disturbed. Probably the future generation that's coming up will not have a place to stay. We want them to understand that the agricultural practices need to be kept intact, whether it's going to be traditional method or you are going to enable certain technology inside. But nevertheless, harming the ecosystem and environment is definitely going to cost you. So that's why we don't want the system to get affected at any point of time. Followed by, we have also planned by 2030 to reduce the global maternal mortality to less than 70% of that of 1 lakh live birth. Now, the concept of having a child and the child program across the world is quite fantastic. Why? Because we as human beings have always aspired, desired to have kids. We believe that kids are the purpose of our life. And whenever we look into those tiny thoughts, that gives us happiness. But this happiness is not found in every part of this globe. Every children that is going to have a good life might not be, the same way how we are going to look at the different corners of the world. Not every child gets that priority. Not every child gets that kind of a luxury to live a life of its choice. But what we can do is that we can try to set a benchmark where we want to reduce the maternal mortality rate to that of 70% of that of 1 lakh live birth. So that would definitely help the child to be closer to the mother, have a better life altogether. And the 1/3 premature mortality, non-communicable diseases. Now these are certain things which are just pulling up altogether. Why do I say that at any point of time is that these diseases or these kind of activities are not supported by the nature. They are something against the nature. But when we talk about these factors, when we try to talk about prevention of diseases, when we try to talk about promoting mental health, this is not going to be an easy thing. Why? Because there are certain things where science and technology have taken us to that extent. We have completely forgotten about our environment. We believe that anything and everything can be achieved by the immense use of technology. Now, that use of technology has also hampered the lives of people in India as well as the globe, which has actually led to kind of diseases, kind of mental depression, which cannot be avoided. So what we want in the future, we want to have a sustainable life. We want to have a stable, steady life where we are free from the mental health problems. Why? I personally believe that half of the diseases that are there in our body is primarily because of the mental health problems. They are not because of any other external usage. Of course, we do believe that there is a lot of chemicals and other factors that are coming into our body. No doubts about it. But at the end of the day, let us understand this factor very clearly. If you are not going to have a sound mental health condition, then you might not be a kind of person who's going to support your family in the long run. Now, moving further, we also want to talk about a very important concept called as the free, equitable and quality primary secondary education for all boys and girls by the year 2030. Sometime down the lane, we spoke about this in line and length, the quality of education that is being provided across the globe. Now, everybody here would try to argue, would try to deny, would try to bring in their own aspect, saying that education has its own dimensions. Nevertheless, we are not going to argue about it right now. But what we want is that education should not become a luxury. Education should not become an accessible factor only for certain section of the society. Education should be made as a primary access to every child in this world. What we want out of education is an effective learning outcome where education makes that girl or boy ready to manage his or her life. We want education to be practical, skill-oriented, and also where you can convert those kids into intellectual citizens. At the end of the day, what we see here is that the word free and equitable, including the word quality, are being misjudged. When we say free, it is all about the cost factor, no doubt about it. But still, the question comes, who actually wants to take up the responsibility of delivering education free? Who wants to make it that a private school and public school should look alike? And who wants to give the same quality that is being given in some Ivy League institution to the public institutions also? So there's a big challenge. There's a big question mark that is coming into the minds of people. Are we going to manage the cost? Are we going to make it equal in terms of opportunities? And are we going to give the same trend and quality which is being followed in the top institutions of the world? And then only we can probably achieve this target of saying that, yes, we have been making education accessible and available to all, followed by to measure the equal access for men and women to afford that of vocational education and the tertiary education, which means to say that today across the globe, if you start counting the dropout rates altogether, there has been a huge amount of impact all about it. But nevertheless, this impact has been caused. Why? Because people feel that there is a lot of thought processes, a lot of challenges that are coming in terms of making us understand how it is going in, how things are moving further, and all those factors that are coming into picture. But what we are seriously interested upon, what we want the system to go about is that we want the system to have equal access given to all the people across all sections of the society. So at one point of time, I want to really emphasize upon this factor, saying that we would be able to generate a better education system, a better ideology where everybody can be part of this entire educational process. Followed by eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls, public, private, including the traffic, the sexual abuse, and all those factors that we have been talking about. Achieve that universal and equitable access to affordable drinking water, which is a very big priority in most of the cases in this world, followed by protecting and restoring water-related ecosystems. So somewhere down the lane, the respect for women, the respect for having a free and a social life is still coming under question mark, which cannot be avoided at all. Now, in India, we have been going through these cases for a very, very long time. But today, we want to see an India where every woman gets her respect, gets her space, gets the identity. We don't want this kind of activity to happen. Why? Because that demoralizes the society. That demoralizes the very basic purpose of life. So we don't want to have this kind of a system that's going to put us into challenge. Followed by, we want to achieve a universal and equitable access, which means to say that yes, we want to give everybody safe drinking water to our system. It is not that only certain parts of the country will get a good drinking water and other people have to still starve, still stand in those long queues carrying the pots on the head. No, we don't want to see that kind of an India. We want to see an India where everybody gets the basic access to drinking water and also see the flora and fauna intact. So that's why by 2030, by 2020, the Protect is already started. We have gone with that journey, and we want to see that at the end of this journey, we are able to create a fantastic system where people can live together. Now, by 2030, the next factor that we are talking about is ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, modern energy system. Energy crisis has always been a very big talk for all of us. We all know that we have been switching to alternative modes of energy from oil and gas. We are going towards electricity. We want to go into renewable energy systems. We want to see that whether the energy can be bought out from different sources and services. Today, we are talking about solar, hybrid, electricity, and other different models. But then substantially, one has to understand, one has to completely go by this factor that the renewable energy is not available immediately. You have to work on it. You cannot just say that renewable energy can be implemented easily, can be given off so easily altogether. Why? Because There is a lot of difference that we are talking about. There's a lot of factors that are coming into picture here. So at the end of the day, what we want to see is that whether the energy factors that we have been talking about, that we have been doing, are we able to implement it and bring in an alternative resource, alternative factor altogether. By 2030, we also want to enhance international cooperation, facilitate the clean energy research, including the advancement in terms of fossil fuel technology, promote a better investment in energy infrastructure. Not to forget, we also want to develop development-oriented policies that could support the entrepreneurship and productivity activities, innovation. Why? Because after the pandemic, we have been able to see that there is a huge thrust that has been coming towards in terms of entrepreneurship and growth-related activities. So we want to see that the formalization of the small and micro, small, medium companies are able to develop. They are able to give better job opportunities, better employment opportunities altogether, and also an access through the financial services given forward. With this, I come to the end of the session. I hope and believe that all the factors that have been spoken through this particular session would be of a great value, both in terms of practical as well as from a theory standpoint. In the upcoming sessions, we are going to talk about sustainable development in terms of planning, in terms of various other localization factors, so that we are able to go forward in the journey of sustainable development. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.